Well, tonight, Jussie Smollett's legal troubles are going from bad to worse. A grand jury today indicted the Empire star on 16 counts of felony disorderly conduct, namely false reports of a crime after he claimed to be the victim of a racist and anti-gay attack on the streets of Chicago. Police think it was all a work of fiction by the actor, who's out on bail after a single charge against him last month. A short time ago, I spoke with Smollett's defense attorney, Mark Garagos, who's maintaining Smollett's innocence. Isn't it just weird that you get allegedly attacked by two people you actually know, who've actually been on Empire, who you've actually worked out with, and you don't recognize them?
Yeah, yes. And but guess what? I don't know whether he made that statement but what I do know is that when he was told that they had evidence against these two, he refused to sign the complaint because he could not believe it. If he thought they were in on it, would he have signed the complaint? Wouldn't he have signed the complaint? He didn't believe it. Now, if you're asking me what their motivation is, I suppose I could speculate, but motivation of Jussie is not an element of the crime. Their motivation, I've got my theories on it, but I haven't seen one piece of evidence, and they don't have one piece of evidence that they've turned over that links Jussie to this. What they do have is a whale of a case. As if you believe what the police chief is saying, they've got a great case against the two brothers.
With me now is New York Times columnist Charles Blow and CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Joey, just let's start with the legal aspects. I'm wondering what you make of Mark Garagos' argument at this point. Essentially, this is just overkill by the prosecutors, that they don't have the evidence, and their allegations that he wanted more money from Empire and more attention. That there's no evidence, according to Mark Garagos, that anyone from the police department has spoken to anybody at the production, so they have no way of even knowing that.
I know Mark Garagos. He's a colleague, obviously, of mine. I know him to be an outstanding lawyer and certainly a good person. Having said that, I see things completely different as it relates to this case. Now, just backing up a bit and reminding the viewers that this is an indictment. And what an indictment means is that there's reasonable cause to believe that a crime were committed, or crimes in this case were committed, and that Jussie Smollett committed them. There's no cross-examination in the grand jury. There's no judge in the grand jury. The grand jurors don't get to vet the information that they're provided. The district attorney simply provides that information. 16 grand jurors are sit, and if a majority believes they're not deciding guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, they're just deciding probable cause, then they'll indict. Having said that, I completely disagree with my colleague for a variety of reasons. Number one, as it relates to your cross-examination of him, essentially, which is, doesn't the story have to make sense? It has to make sense. And so when you parse the story itself and you talk about someone who's out at 2 a.m. in the frigid cold, in Chicago, going to a subway, not giving the police his phone records, and then, oh, by the way, redacting them and giving them to them, and then telling them a story about how he saw the whites of, the eyes, and that's how he knew that they happened to be white, and it turns out they were black. None of the story makes sense, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then you get to the actual issues in and of themselves, which are, forgetting about the story, just the lies of which he told and the motivations. At the end of the day, the grand jury having indicted and a jury impaneled and will hear the case, you don't have to decide what motivations are. The superintendent was out there talking about how, hey, he didn't get enough pay, he did not get enough pay. That's not the issue. The issue is, did he lie or did he not? And I think based upon that, it's a very difficult case for the defense.
Yeah. Charles, does any of this make sense to you yet? I mean, you and I talked about this very early on in this
what
case.
What part of it?
I don't know. I mean, the whole thing just seems... I just don't understand it. I mean, Mark Garagos is saying that basically seems to be pointing at these two brothers, that it says that there is evidence against them. There's none against Jussie Smollett. I'm wondering how you see this.
Right. So I was waiting for some defense because the evidence as laid out by the police department seemed very compelling. We didn't get to see it. They just told us about it. So I didn't get to read transcripts of interviews or anything. So you couldn't really make an assessment. You just had to take their word for it. And that's tricky with the Chicago Police Department. Let's just be honest about that. But it was compelling against him. And so I was waiting to see, because he kept maintaining that he was innocent. So I'm waiting to see, what could you possibly say? It seems that Garagos is saying, now I'm going to put my client up against these two brothers, and the jury's going to have to see which of these two groups of people they believe. And Garagos's words, you have actual evidence that these brothers did something. You're going to have to give me proof positive that my client instructed them to do it, and where is the proof of that? And that maybe that's the defense. I agree with Joey. There are a lot of other things around that he said that are shaky, and I think we wouldn't even be talking about this were it not for the invocation of whiteness and of Trump support. Other than that, if it was just another black guy claiming, either being assaulted or claiming to be assaulted because he was gay, we wouldn't even talk. And that's a tragedy in America in and of itself. And I say to people who are white and feel like this is a group attack, or people who are Trump supporters and feel like it's a group attack, I actually understand that feeling, that tribal response to something and feeling like something that is targeted. Some people actually applies to the whole. But I want you to remember this feeling the next time that the president attacks a black man when he's kneeling, and for social justice, and why everybody who's engaged in social justice takes that as a tribal attack and responds as such, because they're responding exactly the way that you feel today. Every time that he takes an attack on women and individual women, and all women take that as a tribal attack, this is that feeling. So I understand your feeling. Keep that energy and remember this feeling when the shoe is on the other foot.
Joey, just in terms of the legal, the timeline, what happens next?
Well, what happens next is you go, and on Thursday, what will happen is he'll be presented to the judge. The judge will know and understand, or ask him whether he knows and understands that he's facing an indictment, what the charges are in the indictment. Once he has been read the indictment, and I would assume his attorneys would waive a public reading, they'll just ask whether he understands what he's being accused of. He'll enter a plea of not guilty. And then at that point, discovery, which I heard Mark say he hasn't had any or doesn't have adequate discovery, which is just the exchange of information, police reports, documents, etc. He'll get those. He'll be allowed to make any motions he wants. I know there's issues concerning, leaks in the police department, internal investigations. That's going to mean nothing. It may mean something as it relates to administratively charging police who are leaking things. It doesn't mean anything for his client. And then ultimately, his client will have his day in court where there'll be a full-blown trial. I mean, I just think there's a lot to be said, Anderson, for a mea culpa here. In the event that the evidence is as it is, you march yourself into the district attorney's office pre-indictment, and you say, hey, listen, we could resolve this. By all accounts, Jussie Smollett is an outstanding person, has done a lot for the community, is a very beloved figure. And if the evidence is as it purports to be, and I haven't heard it defended yet, I've heard a lot of accusations about the police and about people being fired from the hospital for leaking information.
Right.
That means nothing as it relates to whether he's guilty or not. And it may be, time to settle up and get this thing done and over.
Interesting.